The lie of history. For as long as the galaxy could remember, the name of humanity was spoken only as a myth, a story whispered in ancient halls and taught in schools as nothing more than a cautionary tale to remind young minds that arrogance leads. To ruin the Galactic Council made sure that every species believed the same truth. Humans had never existed. They were simply a fabrication created by primitive civilizations to explain the unknown and to frighten children into obedience. Yet there were always questions that lingered, questions the Council avoided with silence. A young archivist named Kale lived on the cold world of Xyrith, where libraries stretched like endless cathedrals of data carved into frozen mountains. His duty was to record and preserve history for future generations. But Kale was not content with repeating what had already been written. He was curious too. Curious, some said, for his own good. When he read the official records, something felt wrong. The timelines of great wars did not align. There were entire decades missing with only vague references to conflicts against unnamed adversaries, and the descriptions seemed deliberately erased words replaced by blank entries or strange symbols that meant nothing. One night while working late, Kale found an old data crystal buried deep in a forgotten corner of the archive. Its outer surface cracked, as if it had been hidden in haste. He activated it, expecting it to be damaged, but what appeared before him was unlike anything he had seen. It showed sketches of beings tall and fierce with eyes full of fire and strength. They were called Terrans, a word he had never heard before. Yet the description spoke of resilience unmatched by any known species they fought. Wars against impossible odds, survived planets labeled death worlds, and built weapons beyond imagination. The Council claimed they were myths, yet the details were far too precise to be legend. Kale felt a chill as he read further. The crystal described an event called the Erasure. It spoke of fleets from every corner of the galaxy joining together to fight this mysterious species, humanity. The reason was unclear. The records only said that humanity threatened the balance of power and had to be removed for the survival of all others. Kale's hands trembled as he realized what this meant. Humans were not myths. They were real. They were powerful, and they were destroyed deliberately. And every trace of their existence had been wiped away. He could not sleep that night. The images of the humans haunted his mind. He wondered why the Council would hide such truth if humans were so dangerous. Why not simply remember them as conquerors? Why erase them entirely unless the truth was even more terrifying than the legend? Kale knew that by asking questions he risked punishment. The Council guarded its secrets with merciless control, yet his curiosity burned brighter than his fear. He began to search the forbidden archives, breaking codes, and slipping past security walls as he pieced together fragments of lost history. The more he found, the heavier the weight grew in his chest. Whole star systems scarred by wars where no official record admitted a battle had been fought, monuments, destroyed worlds left barren, and yet always the same pattern. Something powerful had stood against the galaxy and was buried in silence. Kale began to believe that the galaxy's greatest lie was not that humans never existed, but that they once ruled the stars and were betrayed by those who now sat on the Council thrones. The truth shook him, and yet it pulled him deeper, for he knew that history once uncovered could never be forgotten, and what he was about to uncover next would change not only his life but the fate of the entire galaxy. Forbidden archives. Kale could not shake the weight of what he had uncovered the night before. His mind turned again and again to the strange word Terrans and the secret war that had been hidden. From every history book he had ever studied, he wanted to believe it was only a mistake or perhaps an exaggerated legend. But deep inside he knew the Council had lied, and if they had gone to such lengths to bury the truth, then the truth itself must be dangerous. The next day, Kale made his way to the restricted levels of the archive, places where only High Council historians were permitted to walk the air. There was colder, the corridors darker, the crystal walls embedded with glowing runes that seemed to watch him as he passed. He used code stolen from an old mentor who had once trusted him with tasks far beyond his station. Kyle felt guilt for breaking that trust, but the hunger for knowledge overpowered every doubt. Each door he passed led him further away from safety and deeper into shadows where secrets slept. He came to a chamber sealed with layered locks. He hesitated at the final door, but his heart pounded with anticipation when the door slid open. A blast of stale, Air greeted him inside were shelves of ancient storage cubes and crystalline records untouched for centuries. He lit a lantern globe, and the glow reflected off dust motes floating like ghosts around him. He pulled the first cube he found and activated. The projection that appeared was a battle record. Starships locked in combat across the black of space explosions tearing through fleets, entire armadas burning in silence. Yet the enemy was never named. The record described them as adversaries, unknown. But Kale recognized the tall figures from the sketches on the damaged crystal. Their weapons were crude compared to the advanced machines of the other species, but their tactics were unrelenting. Even when their ships were torn apart, they rammed them into enemy cruisers even when their soldiers bled out. They kept fighting with broken weapons in their hands. The words of commanders in the records betrayed something the Council had erased. Fear. They were afraid of this species, afraid of the Terrans, afraid of humanity. Kale sifted through more files, some half erased, others scrambled, but the pattern grew clear. Humans had not simply appeared and vanished. They had been targeted. A great alliance had formed against them. And though humanity resisted with unthinkable determination, the numbers overwhelmed them and their worlds fell one by one. Yet nowhere was there mention of what became of the survivors. The records ended with silence, as if the galaxy itself had turned away. From the memory of the last stand, Kale's hands shook as he copied the records onto his own crystal drive. He knew that if the Council discovered him here, he would be exiled, or worse, erased like the very species he now studied. But he also knew he could not stop. Something inside him demanded answers. He felt as though he was being pulled by invisible hands down a path that had been waiting for him alone. When he finally left the chamber, he glanced around to make sure no one had followed him, but he did not notice the faint glimmer of a surveillance drone hidden high in the ceiling. Its eye fixed upon him, recording his every move. Already somewhere deep within the Council chambers, alarms whispered that a forbidden archive had been opened and a name long buried had been spoken once more. Humanity, the myth reborn in secret. Kale walked into the night air of Zyrith, and for the first time in his life, the stars above did not feel distant. They felt alive, as though they were watching and waiting. He whispered the forbidden word Terran, and felt it echo in his chest like a promise. He knew the Council would come for him soon, but he also knew he was not done searching. The truth was only beginning to unfold, and he would follow it no matter the cost. Whispers of survivors. Kale did not return to the archives for several days. His discovery burned inside his mind, and he feared that every passing face on the street knew his secret. He moved carefully, speaking little and keeping his eyes down, yet the weight of what he carried made silence impossible. He needed answers more than he needed safety, so he began to search for voices outside the reach of the Council. In the marketplaces of Zyrith, merchants often spoke freely of rumors and forbidden tales, so Kale disguised himself in a heavy cloak and listened. As he walked among the stalls, he heard whispers of distant colonies abandoned by the Council long ago, where strange artifacts had been found. He caught the word Terran, spoken by an old trader who quickly hushed when others looked at him. Kyle approached the man later in the shadows and offered him credits for his story. The trader hesitated, but his eyes showed a flicker of fear, then respect when Kale spoke the forbidden word aloud. The man leaned closer and told him that travelers had spoken of ruins in the uncharted edges of space. Ruins that did not belong to any known species, and some swore that descendants of the erased still lived there, hidden. Away from the Council's eyes, Kale's heart raced as he left the marketplace. He knew it was dangerous, but he also knew it was the truth. The galaxy was too vast for complete destruction to be certain, and the Council's effort to bury the memory of humans only proved that something remained. So he made plans to leave Zyrith. He gathered what little he owned, sold his comforts for credits, and bribed his way onto a freighter bound for the border regions. The stars stretched endless around him as the ship left orbit, and Kale felt both fear and hope entwined. During the long journey, he spent nights alone studying the records he had stolen. The more he read, the more he understood why humanity had terrified the galaxy. They had an ability to adapt to any environment they thrived on. Planets others could not endure. They turned weaknesses into weapons. They did not surrender. Even when outnumbered, Kale wondered what it would be like to meet one of them, to look into the eyes of a being who had faced extinction and still endured. When the freighter stopped at a barren outpost on the edge of known space, Kyle slipped away with a small exploration crew who claimed to have seen unusual ruins on a nearby world. The planet was scarred and lifeless, its surface cracked by ancient bombardments. They searched among the ruins, broken towers half buried in ash, strange symbols carved into black stone. Kale touched one of the carvings and felt a chill. It matched the word Terran, the same word he had found in the archives as night fell. They camped among the ruins, but Kale could not sleep. He thought he saw shapes moving in the shadows, figures watching from the cliffs above. He tried to dismiss it as fear until one of the crew vanished without a sound. Panic spread as the others searched but found nothing. Kyle remained calm, though his chest burned with dread. He knew then what no one else dared to speak. They were not alone on this dead world. Something was still here, something that should have been gone. The ruins were not abandoned, as the council claimed. They were a veil, hiding the survivors of humanity, and Kale realized with a trembling certainty that the whispers were true. Humans had not been erased completely, they had endured, and now he was standing on the edge of a truth that would either destroy him or change the galaxy forever. The awakening of the forgotten Kale stood among the ruins with the crew huddled in fear as the silence of the night pressed down on them. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes on his back, and every gust of wind carried a sense of warning. One of the crew wanted to leave at once, but Kyle refused. He had come too far to turn back. Now he walked away from the camp, lantern in hand, his steps guided by something deeper than curiosity. It was as though the ruins themselves were calling to him. He followed a path of shattered stone that led into a canyon. The walls rose high above him, carved with marks that looked almost like battle scars. His lantern flickered and then went dark. Yet ahead, he saw a faint glow that did not belong to the stars. Kyle moved toward it, his breath quick and shallow. When he reached the source, he found a door built into the rock, not of alien design but of metal, dark and ancient, its surface engraved with the same word he had seen again and again, Terran. With trembling hands, he pushed against the door, and it opened with a slow groan, revealing a passage that led downward into the mountain. He entered without hesitation. The walls were lined with strange devices flickering weakly with light. After centuries of silence, the air was heavy with the smell of rust and old fire. He descended further until the passage opened into a vast chamber. What he saw made him stop in awe. There were people there. At first he thought they were ghosts, but then he realized they were living, breathing beings. Their eyes sharp, their bodies strong even though their clothes were worn and patched. They carried themselves with a confidence that no other species Kale had met possessed. They looked at him with suspicion, some raising weapons shaped from salvaged metal. Their leader, a tall woman with hair streaked by gray, stepped forward and demanded in a tongue Kale did not know who he was. Kale raised his hands slowly and spoke the word, Terran. The reaction was instant. The chamber filled with murmurs. The woman's eyes narrowed, but she lowered her weapon. She answered him in halting galactic common, asking how he knew the word. Kale told them the truth. He spoke of the archives, the erased records, the whispers that had brought him here. He said he wanted only to know if they were real. The woman studied him for a long moment before nodding and declaring that they were indeed Terrans, that they were human, and that they had survived. Kale felt his chest tighten as the weight of the moment sank into him. The myth of humanity had become flesh before his eyes. The humans led him deeper into their hidden refuge, a vast network of caverns filled with families, children, training yards, and forges where weapons were made. Their numbers were not great, perhaps, only a few thousand, but every face carried the fire of survival. The leader told him that after the great betrayal, when the galaxy turned against them, small groups of humans had fled into the shadows. Some died, but others endured in hidden worlds. Far from the reach of the council, they had built their lives in silence, waiting for the day they would rise again. Kale listened with awe as they spoke of their history, their voices filled with pain and pride. He could see now why the council feared them, for in their eyes burned a strength unlike any other. These were not broken survivors. They were the descendants of warriors hardened by centuries of struggle. They had been forgotten by design, erased from the records of history. Yet here they stood alive, fierce and unbroken. Kale knew at that moment that the galaxy was standing on the edge of something it could not control. Humanity was awakening, and the truth once hidden was about to return to the stars, the Council's fear. While Kale walked among the hidden humans and learned their stories far across the galaxy, the Council chamber stirred with unease in the heart of the capital. The great hall was filled with towering figures from every major species, their voices rising in argument as a single word echoed again and again across the chamber. Humanity, it had been centuries since that name had been spoken aloud, and yet now it returned carried by whispers of surveillance reports and the silent alarms that had gone off. When Kale had broken into the forbidden archives, the High Speaker of the Council demanded silence and the chamber grew still. His eyes were sharp as he looked at the gathered leaders and declared that the word Terran was never to be spoken outside. The chamber for it was a reminder of the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. Some argued that the alarms could have been triggered by mistake, others that the evidence was too faint to stir panic. But those who had lived long enough to remember the stories of the old war spoke with trembling voices. They remembered human fleets that fought until the last vessel burned. They remembered soldiers who would fight with bare hands when their weapons failed. They remembered that even when humanity was crushed, they did not beg for mercy. The Council debated for hours, but fear lingered like a shadow in every word. The idea that even a fragment of humanity had survived terrified them. If the galaxy learned the truth that humans were not a myth, then the carefully crafted lies of the Council would crumble, and their power with it. Worse still, if humans had endured, then they had spent centuries in hiding, sharpening their strength. While the galaxy grew soft, the Speaker ordered that the archives be locked tighter than ever, and that all records of the breach be sealed, but already it was too late. Rumors had escaped into the stars carried by traders and explorers who had no loyalty to the Council. Whispers spread of a hidden people, fierce and unbroken. Meanwhile, Kale sat with the human leader, the tall woman who called herself Mara. She spoke to him in a low, steady voice. Her words filled with both sorrow and steel. She told him how their ancestors had fled the slaughter, how they had buried themselves in worlds forgotten by maps, how they had taught every child the truth, even as the galaxy sought to erase them. Kyle listened with rapt attention as she explained that humanity had not simply survived, but had prepared every generation, trained to fight, hardened to endure, and waiting for the moment when the galaxy would be forced to face them again. Kale asked her if they intended to attack the Council. Her gaze grew distant as she said that humanity had no wish to conquer, but they had sworn an oath that they would never again allow themselves to be hunted like prey. If the galaxy sought to destroy them again, they would fight, and this time they would not be erased. Kale felt the fire in her words, and he knew then why. The Council feared them, for these people carried within them the memory of suffering turned into unyielding resolve. Far away on the capital world, the Speaker dismissed the Council session, but in private he summoned his most trusted advisors. He told them the truth, that he believed the humans had survived, and that if they had survived then they would return. And when they did, the galaxy would tremble. Once more the Council began to plan in secret, to send out agents to silence the whispers and destroy any trace of human survival. But fear had already taken root, and fear spreads faster than any fleet in the dark of space. The return of humanity. Kyle remained with the hidden humans for many weeks, and in that time he saw with his own eyes the truth that the galaxy had been denied for generations. They were not broken remnants, clinging to survival, but a people forged in silence and struggle. Their children learned history from the day they could speak. They were taught the betrayal that had nearly destroyed them, and the oath that bound them never again to bow before. The Council. Kale watched as young men and women trained in the caverns using weapons made from scavenged alloys, their strikes sharp and their endurance unyielding. He saw the elders guiding them with stories of worlds lost and battles fought long. Before their births, every face burned with the same flame that had carried their ancestors through extinction, and it filled Kale with awe. One night Mara, the leader, called him to a chamber lit by firelight. She told him the time for hiding was ending. Too many whispers had escaped into the stars, and the Council would soon move against them. She said that humanity had waited centuries for the choice to be made, either to remain shadows forever, or to rise and take their place among the stars once more. Kyle asked what would happen if the council chose to attack Mara, answered with a voice steady as stone. Then we will remind them why they feared us. Kale felt the weight of her words echo through his soul. Soon after, a great gathering was held. In the heart of the caverns, thousands of humans stood together, their voices rising as Mara stepped onto a high platform. She spoke to them of their ancestors, of the pain carved into their blood, of the oath that no child would ever again be told they did not exist. She raised her hand and declared that the time had come to return. The cavern thundered with voices shouting as one, "We are human," and Kale knew then that the galaxy would never be the same. The first sign of their return came quietly. A single human ship, small and rough yet fast, emerged from the shadows of uncharted space. It entered the trade lanes, and every vessel that saw it spread the tale across the networks within days. The name human was spoken openly once more, and though many dismissed it as rumor, others trembled, for they remembered the ancient fear when the council finally acknowledged the sighting. It was already too late. Fleets of hidden human ships began to appear one after another, sleek but scarred vessels that bore the mark of centuries of struggle. They did not come as conquerors, but as survivors stepping into the light. Kyle stood aboard one of these ships as it moved toward a council border world. He watched the crewmen and women who carried themselves with unshakable confidence, their eyes fixed on the horizon. Mara herself stood at the front, her voice calm as she spoke to her people. She said that this was not a war of conquest, but a declaration that humanity had returned, that they would no longer be erased. Kale felt the energy of her words surge through the crew and through himself. When the ship arrived at the council world, a great assembly was forced by the sudden appearance of human vessels. Mara stepped forward onto the surface and faced the council envoys who came trembling to meet her. Kyle watched as she spoke. Clearly, "We are human. We are not myth, and we have survived. You tried to erase us, but we endure. We remember your betrayal, and we will not forgive. Yet we do not come to conquer. We come to claim what was always ours, a place in the stars." The galaxy listened and trembled. The myth had walked out of the shadows into the heart of their worlds, and the fear of old wars returned stronger than ever, for humanity had declared itself alive, and the galaxy understood that no lie, no archive, no erasure could hide the truth anymore. Humanity had returned, and nothing could undo it. The truth shatters the galaxy. The news spread faster than light could travel. Human ships had appeared in council space, and their leader had spoken words that no one could deny. Entire star systems buzzed with the revelation. Traders spoke of faces that should not exist. Commanders whispered warnings to their fleets, and common citizens who had been raised on the lie that humans were myth now asked themselves what else the council had hidden. Fear and hope clashed in equal measure. The galaxy could not return to silence. The council held an emergency summit, their chamber tense with voices raised in panic. The speaker demanded immediate military action to crush the survivors before their numbers grew. Others argued that such a move would only prove that the council had indeed lied for centuries already. Their citizens were questioning their rule. Riots broke out in cities across the core worlds. Banners were lifted demanding truth and justice, and some even demanded alliance with the newly revealed humans. The galaxy trembled, not because of fleets, but because of truth. Kale stood at the center of it all. Though he had never been more than an archivist, now he found himself an unwilling bridge between two worlds. He watched as Mara prepared her people for the storm to come, her voice steady as she reminded them of their oath to survive no matter the cost. Fleets of human ships emerged from hidden strongholds, not vast in number compared to the council armadas, but each one built with the cunning of survivors, each one piloted by men and women who had been trained since birth to endure. Kale saw in their eyes no fear of death, only the certainty that their ancestors still walked with them. The first confrontation came on the edge of the Veyron system, where a council fleet attempted to block the passage of human ships. Kale stood beside Mara on the bridge as the two sides faced one another. The council demanded surrender. Mara's reply was simple: humanity does not surrender. The council threatened destruction, and Mara ordered her ships to hold position without firing a single shot. Tension stretched like a blade ready to break when suddenly across the networks, Broadcasts lit up as humans revealed their history to every corner of the galaxy. They sent records of the erasure testimonies, from survivors and images of their people alive and unbroken. The effect was like fire in dry fields. Worlds that had doubted now believed worlds that had feared now, questioned the Council's right to rule the Council. Ships facing Mara hesitated, their crews shaken by the revelation that the enemy before them were not monsters, but living proof of betrayal. Orders from the speaker demanded attack, but hesitation spread like a disease through the fleet, and at last one commander refused, and turned his ship away. Others followed until the blockade dissolved without a single shot. Fired Kale knew then that humanity had already won, not with weapons, but with truth. The galaxy could never again erase their name. The Council might still plot and resist, but the myth had become reality, and reality cannot be silenced. Mara stood tall and declared to her people that the stars were theirs once more, not by conquest, but by endurance. Their return was not the beginning of war. It was the end of a lie and the rebirth of a species. As Kale looked into the faces of the humans around him, he felt the weight of history settling at last. Humanity had endured against extinction, against betrayal, against time itself. And now they stood unbroken. Before the galaxy, he knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but he also knew the galaxy would never forget again for the truth. Once revealed can never be hidden, and the truth was simple. Humanity lived. Humanity endured. Humanity had returned. Humanity's echo, the galaxy, had been built upon lies and silence, and now those walls had been broken. The name of humanity echoed across every system, carried in whispers, carried in fear, carried in hope. Citizens who had once believed they were nothing more than legend now shouted their name in the streets. The Council tried to hold its grip, but their voices rang hollow, for the truth had already escaped their chains. Kyle watched from the human flagship as Mara stood before her, people her presence, fierce and unyielding. She spoke not of vengeance but of destiny. She reminded them that survival itself was their victory, that every child born in the shadows of exile was proof that no empire, no council, no erasure could destroy them. Her words, carried through the comms into every corner of space and beings of many worlds, heard her voice and felt a shiver of respect. The Council called for war, but its fleets faltered, their captains hesitant, their soldiers torn between duty and the undeniable truth before them. One battle began at the edge of a forgotten system and ended without a shot. As the Council commanders refused to fire upon those who had been wronged so deeply, Kale realized then that the fear that once united the galaxy against humanity was now turning against the Council itself. Fear of truth, fear of rebellion, fear of the people they had ruled through lies for so long. Among the humans there was no cry for conquest, only for recognition. They carried the scars of betrayal, but they carried them with pride, not shame. Every man, woman, and child had been raised with the knowledge that they were meant to endure. And now the stars themselves seemed to bend closer, as if to acknowledge their return. Kale felt as though he was watching history breathe again, a myth stepping forward and claiming its rightful place among the living. Mara looked at him one final time, and her eyes held both fire and sorrow. She told him that the galaxy would change, and that nothing would ever be the same again. He believed her, for he had seen what truth could do. He had seen how one word, one story could shatter the chains of silence and awaken something greater than fear. Kale knew that the galaxy had not witnessed the end of humanity. It had only witnessed the beginning of their return. And as the human fleet spread across the skies, reclaiming forgotten worlds and broken homes, as voices rose in defiance against the Council, as the myth became the fire that could no longer be extinguished, one truth stood above all others: humanity had survived, humanity had endured, humanity had returned the end.